This story is titled, After I Found My Brother in Bed with My Girlfriend, My Parents Took Their Side and Tried to Reunite Us. I Vanished. Now karma made them beg for forgiveness. Hi Reddit, I'm 27 years old and currently living in Oregon, though that's about to change as my story unfolds. I grew up in what appeared to be a typical middle-class family from the outside, but the dynamics inside our house were beyond messed up in ways I didn't fully understand until recently. My younger brother Lucas is 26, just a year younger than me, but the difference in how we were treated growing up might as well have made us from different planets. Lucas was the quintessential mommy's boy from as far back as I can remember. You know those kids who could literally destroy something valuable and their mom would praise them for being creative or expressing themselves? That was Lucas, every single time. Meanwhile, I spent my teenage years busting my ass working construction with my uncle, starting when I was just 16 during summers. I was learning a trade, developing a work ethic, and trying to build towards something. While I was coming home with calloused hands and an appreciation for earning my own money, Lucas was allowed to focus on his artistic side, which essentially meant smoking weed in our basement and attempting to become a famous streamer. A career path that never materialized despite years of trying. Mom always had the perfect excuses ready for why Lucas deserved special treatment. He's just finding himself, she would say, with that knowing smile. Or, he's sensitive, as if that explained why he shouldn't have responsibilities. My favorite was always, he needs time to figure things out, which apparently meant indefinite freedom from any actual obligations or consequences. The double standard was so blatant it was almost comical. If I came home exhausted from a 12-hour shift and didn't immediately help with the dishes, I was becoming lazy and needed to learn responsibility. The irony that I was the only one actually demonstrating responsibility seemed completely lost on my mother. Don't get me wrong, I was still your typical suburban kid in most ways. I played lacrosse in high school and was pretty good at it too. Our team made it to state championships my senior year, and we would have won if our team captain hadn't broken his leg in the third quarter. That loss still stings a little when I think about it. One of my few escapes from the constant comparisons was spending weekends fixing motorcycles with my dad in our garage. Looking back, those hours tinkering with engines might have been the only times I felt like I actually had a parent who saw and appreciated me for who I was rather than who they wanted me to be. My sister Kate is 24 and was always the smart one in our family. She was constantly reading and had this quiet intelligence that made her stand out. She was clearly Dad's favorite, but not in the weird, unhealthy way that Lucas was Mom's golden child. Kate and Dad just understood each other better. She'd help him with Sudoku puzzles while I worked on bikes alongside them. It was a good balance, or at least as close to balance as our family ever managed to achieve. College is where I really started pulling ahead of Lucas in a way that was impossible for anyone rational to ignore, though my mother would never admit it, of course. I busted my ass through architectural engineering at Oregon State, working construction jobs on weekends to avoid taking out student loans. Every Saturday and Sunday when my friends were partying or relaxing, I was on job sites, learning the practical side of what my textbooks were teaching me. Meanwhile, Lucas dropped out of community college after lasting only 2 semesters. He claimed the educational system was too restrictive for his creative spirit, or whatever other excuse my mom was willing to buy that week. She nodded along sympathetically, as if he was making some brave, principled stand against the oppressive forces of higher education, rather than simply being unwilling to put in the work. But despite the family drama, I was making it. I earned decent grades, made good friends who respected hard work, and even landed a solid job at a major construction company after graduation. I was designing commercial buildings, actual structures that people would use for decades. The pay wasn't amazing at first, but I was doing well for my age in Oregon, and I got to work on actual buildings instead of being stuck behind a desk all day pushing paper. That's where I met Lily. She was doing student teaching at an elementary school right next to one of our construction sites. I used to see her during lunch breaks, sitting outside with her students during recess. One day, some kid's ball rolled over to our site and I brought it back. We got talking and man, I really thought she was different from anyone I'd ever met. Lily was studying to be a teacher. She loved kids, and she came from what seemed like a good family. She was basically everything I thought I wanted in a partner, someone stable, caring, and grounded. My mom absolutely loved her from day one, which should have been my first red flag looking back. Mom was always inviting her over for family dinners, even when I was working late at a site and couldn't be there. During these dinners, Lily and Lucas would spend hours talking about movies and music while I was busting my ass trying to build us a future. "It's so nice that you and Lucas get along so well," my mom would say, beaming like she'd personally arranged their friendship. I was too busy working overtime, saving for our future, to notice the warning signs right in front of me. After 3 years together, I proposed to Lily last November. I had it all planned out perfectly. I took her to this spot by a mountain lake where we had our first real date. I got down on one knee in the snow, the whole 9 yards of what I thought a perfect proposal should be. She said yes, and I really thought I had it all figured out. We even put down a payment on a nice house near my parents' place because Lily talked about wanting at least 3 kids and said she wanted to raise them close to family. "Your mom's going to be such an amazing grandmother," she used to say, with this genuine warmth that made me believe our future was set. Hell, all the signs were there if I had been paying attention. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I missed. How she'd always find excuses to hang at my parents' place when I was working weekends. How she and Lucas had all these inside jokes I wasn't part of. How my mom would sometimes make weird comments about how alike they were, or how they just got each other on a different level. But you know how it is when you're in love. You never want to believe the people closest to you could betray you like that. You make excuses, rationalize behavior, and ignore your gut feelings because the alternative is too painful to consider. I remember this one time, about a month before everything went to shit. We were all having dinner at my parents' place. Lily was telling a story about something that happened at her school, some funny incident with one of her students that had everyone at the table laughing. Before she could finish the story, Lucas finished her sentence perfectly, as if he'd heard it before or was somehow reading her mind. They both laughed like it was the most natural thing in the world. This weird, intimate connection they seemed to share. My mom sat there with this weird, satisfied smile on her face, like she was watching something she'd orchestrated finally coming together. Dad and Kate exchanged this look across the table. A look I now understand was concern and awareness of what was happening. But I was too busy thinking about work deadlines to notice what it meant at the time. God, I was blind to what was happening right in front of me. Here's where everything goes to shit. It was a Thursday in March. I remember specifically because we were supposed to pour concrete for a new hospital building foundation. But the supplier fucked up the delivery schedule. My foreman told me to take the afternoon off since we couldn't do anything until the next day. Normally, I would have stayed and caught up on paperwork, but I thought, hey, maybe I'll surprise Lily for lunch. She was always saying how I worked too much and how we needed more spontaneous moments together. I drove home around 1 p.m. and saw Lucas's beat-up Subaru in our driveway. That piece of shit car my mom and dad bought him for his 23rd birthday, even though he'd already totaled 2 other vehicles. I should have known something was up right then and there. He was supposed to be at his part-time job at some vinyl record store, his latest career path that my mom was subsidizing with her constant financial support. I figured maybe he was on his lunch break too, coming to tell Lily about his latest brilliant business idea or whatever creative scheme he was pursuing that week. The front door was unlocked when I arrived. As I stepped inside, I could hear music coming from upstairs. Perfect by Ed Sheeran, which was Lily and I's engagement song. Ironic, right? The soundtrack to my life falling apart was the same song that had played during what I thought was one of my happiest moments. As I moved through the house, I noticed there were clothes scattered up the stairs. His ratty band t-shirt, her teacher cardigan. You know that moment in movies where everything goes quiet and time slows down? That's exactly what happened. I stood there staring at that cardigan, the one I'd gotten her for her birthday, lying there on our stairs like a neon sign pointing to what was happening in our bedroom. I'm not going to describe in detail what I saw when I opened that door. You can figure it out. But here's the part that really fucked with me. They didn't even notice me at first. They just kept going like they were in their own little world, completely oblivious to the fact that they were destroying someone else's life. When they finally saw me standing in the doorway, Lucas actually had the balls to say, "Oh, bro," like he'd just spilled a drink on my couch or something minor and inconvenient, not like he was in bed with my fiancé. Lily started crying immediately, pulling sheets around herself saying, oh God," over and over like a broken record. Lucas just sat there looking at me with this weird mix of guilt and relief, like he was almost glad it was finally out in the open. I didn't say anything. I didn't scream. I didn't throw punches, though God knows I wanted to. I just turned around, walked downstairs, went out to my truck, and sat there for about an hour, staring at nothing, feeling like my entire world had collapsed around me. They both came out eventually. Lucas practically running to his Subaru, Lily standing on our front porch in her robe, mascara running down her face, looking like she wanted to say something but not finding the words. I waited until Lucas left, and then I went back inside. Lily was sitting on the couch, still in her robe, looking like she'd been hit by a truck. I didn't yell or scream. I just asked one simple question. How long? That's all I needed to know. She tried to dodge the question at first, talking about how things just happened, and how she never meant to hurt me. But I wasn't interested in her excuses or justifications. I just kept asking over and over again in the same calm voice that somehow scared even me. How long? Finally, she broke down and told me the truth. 2 years. 2 fucking years. They'd been sleeping together since right after I started taking weekend shifts to save for her engagement ring. All those Saturdays I spent working overtime, thinking I was building our future, she was with him. Every time she said she had to grade papers or work on lesson plans, she was with him. When she went to my parents' house to help mom with gardening, yeah, you guessed it, she was with him. The worst part was that she actually tried to explain herself. She sat there on our couch, the couch I'd spent 4 paychecks on because she said it would be perfect for our future family, and told me how she had developed feelings for Lucas over time. How they had this deep connection through music and art that she and I never had. How she still loved me, but was in love with him. As if those distinctions somehow made her betrayal more palatable. I told her she had until the end of the day to get her stuff and get out. She started crying again, saying she needed more time, that we should talk about this, work through it. I just walked out, drove to the nearest home improvement store, and bought new locks. By the time I got back, she was gone, but she'd left a note. I still have it somewhere. 5 pages of handwritten bullshit about how sorry she was, how she never planned for this to happen, how Lucas made her feel understood in a way I never did. I called my boss and told him I needed a few days off. Then I spent the next 48 hours changing every password I had. Bank accounts, social media, everything. I blocked both of their numbers. The only reason I even knew what happened next is because Kate told me later. Apparently, Lily went straight to my parents' house after leaving our place. She found my mom in the garden, of course, and broke down crying, confessing everything that had happened. And what does my mother do? She hugs her. Actually hugs the woman who just destroyed her son's life and engagement. She tells her that everything happens for a reason, and that maybe this is for the best. She even made her stay for dinner. My mother made my fiancé dinner the same day she caught her cheating with my brother. Lucas showed up too, probably after Lily called him. He had this whole rehearsed speech ready about how they didn't choose this, how love just happens, how they wanted to tell me, but didn't know how. My mom sat there nodding along like this was some Hallmark movie about star-crossed lovers who were destined to be together despite the obstacles. My dad just stared at his plate, saying nothing, while Kate stormed out, the only one showing any appropriate reaction to the soap opera playing out at the dinner table. Lily moved in with her parents initially, but within a week, she was spending every night at my parents' house, in my old room with my brother. And my mom was just okay with it. She actually seemed happy about it. I later found out she'd been encouraging them all along, telling Lucas how Lily was more his type, telling Lily how alike they were, my own mother, orchestrating the destruction of my relationship from within. The next few days are kind of a blur in my memory. I remember Kate coming over with pizza one night, sitting with me while I alternated between rage and emptiness. She was the only one who seemed to understand the magnitude of what had happened. During that visit, she told me my mom was already talking about when things would settle down, and how we'd all laugh about this someday. Yeah, right. As if finding your brother in bed with your fiancé is something you eventually chuckle about at family reunions. That weekend, I got an email from Lily asking to talk about splitting up our shared possessions. I told her to take whatever she wanted. I didn't want anything that reminded me of her anyway. She took most of the furniture, including that expensive couch, leaving me with an empty apartment and an engagement ring I'm still paying off to this day. After the initial discovery and Lily moving out, that's when the real mindfuck started. My mom began this campaign to normalize everything that had happened. She'd casually mention how natural Lucas and Lily's connection was, how she'd always seen something special between them. She started bringing up all these memories of them together, essentially rewriting history to make their betrayal seem like some beautiful love story that was meant to be all along. Remember that music festival they went to together 2 years ago? The one my mom convinced me not to go to because I needed to focus on my career? Yeah, turns out that's when they first hooked up. And my mom knew. She had been encouraging them to spend time together because Lily supposedly brought out a better side of Lucas. Meanwhile, I was working 60-hour weeks trying to save up for a house, for our wedding, for the future I thought we were building together. The worst part was when my mom started suggesting that maybe this was all my fault. "You were always so focused on work," she'd say in that passive-aggressive tone of hers. Or, Lily needed someone who could understand her creative side. As if my crime was working hard to build a life instead of sitting in the basement smoking weed and finding myself like Lucas had been doing for years. Then this supervisor position opened up at our Nevada branch. The pay was significantly better, and honestly, I needed an escape plan. The day I heard about it, I had just found out that Mom had helped Lily move her stuff into Lucas's room. My old room. The room where I'd spent countless nights studying while Lucas was out partying. The room where I'd planned my whole future with Lily. And now they were sleeping in there together, with my mom's blessing. I didn't tell anyone about the job offer at first. I kept it to myself while I watched my family bend over backward to accommodate the people who'd betrayed me. Kate was the only one who seemed to see how fucked up it all was. But even she was starting to crack under my mom's relentless pressure. "Maybe we should try to understand their side," she said one day, not meeting my eyes. That's when I knew I had to get out. But before I could tell anyone about moving, Thanksgiving happened. Oh boy, did it happen. I walked into my parents' house and there they were, Lucas and Lily sitting at the kitchen table like nothing had happened. Lily was wearing this cardigan I'd bought her last year, looking all cozy and at home. Lucas had his arm around her chair like they were the royal couple. My mom was beaming at them as if they were the perfect match she'd always dreamed of. The moment I walked in, everyone went quiet. You know that silence that's so thick you could cut it with a knife? Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Then my mom starts this rehearsed-sounding speech about healing as a family and learning to forgive. My dad just sat there nodding like a dashboard bobblehead, not saying a word. And Kate, Kate, she was sitting next to them, actually sitting with them, looking at me with these guilty eyes. That's when my mom dropped the bomb. She'd invited Lily's parents too, wanted to bring the families together, since Lucas and Lily were getting serious. Getting serious? Like they hadn't been fucking behind my back for 2 years? Like they hadn't destroyed every future plan I had? It was beyond surreal. It was like I'd stepped into some alternate reality where I was the villain for being upset about their betrayal. After seeing Lucas and Lily sitting there at my parents' table like they owned the place, I just broke. You know that moment when everything becomes crystal clear? Like when you're drunk and suddenly get sober in an instant? That's what happened to me. I didn't make a scene or start shouting. I just walked out without saying a word. My mom was calling after me, something about family and healing, and whatever other bullshit she'd rehearsed. But I just kept walking. I got in my truck and drove to Burger King. Sitting there eating a Whopper on Thanksgiving sounds depressing as fuck, right? But honestly, that sad meal in my truck was better than watching my family pretend everything was normal while they passed the gravy to the people who had destroyed my life. While sitting there, surrounded by the only other people sad enough to be at Burger King on Thanksgiving, I started making a list on my phone of everything I needed to do to disappear. Not like witness protection disappear, but to remove this entire situation from my life completely. The Nevada job was already lined up. My boss had been practically begging me to take it. The company was expanding like crazy down there and needed someone with experience running major projects. The first thing I did was go to the bank the next morning. I opened a new account at a completely different bank and transferred every penny from my existing accounts. Thankfully, Lily and I never got around to combining everything financially. The teller gave me this knowing look when I closed my accounts. Turns out her ex had cleaned out their joint account when he left, so she was extra careful making sure everything was properly documented for me. There was this moment of silent understanding between us, two people who had been betrayed by those they trusted most. Next was my phone. Did you know that if you're on a family plan, the primary account holder can see every number you call or text? Yeah, my mom had been using that to keep tabs on me for years, something I hadn't even realized until that moment. I went to a different carrier, got a new number, new phone, everything. The guy at the store helped me transfer all my important contacts and data without linking to any old accounts. Social media was next on my list. But before I nuked everything, I downloaded all my photos and important messages. Then I started systematically blocking people. Lucas, Lily, my mom, my dad, their friends, their families, everyone who had chosen their side. I left Kate blocked, but technically unfriended her. She was still on the fence, and I couldn't deal with that ambiguity either. I changed my email address and created new social media accounts under a slightly different name for work-related networking. The apartment situation was trickier. I still had 4 months left on the lease, but my landlord was surprisingly cool about it. Turns out he'd gone through something similar with his brother years ago and understood exactly what I was going through. He let me break the lease with just 1 month's penalty, which was more than fair given the circumstances. I started packing that night. I threw out anything Lily and I had bought together. That old couch she'd left behind? I posted it for free on Craigslist, and some college kids came and got it within an hour. It felt good watching them haul away that physical reminder of my past life. I was supposed to start the Nevada job in January, but I called my boss and told him I needed to start sooner. I made up some bullshit about wanting to get settled before the holidays, and he was stoked. He said they needed help ASAP anyway, so it worked out perfectly for everyone. I found an apartment in Las Vegas through a guy at work, signed the lease electronically, and paid the deposit that day. The next week was a blur of packing and planning. I only told 2 people what I was really doing: my best friend from the construction crew and my old foreman. They helped me load the U-Haul, no questions asked. My foreman even gave me a heads up that my mom had been calling the office looking for me. The irony of it all was that while I was packing to leave, my mom kept trying to arrange this big family meeting to work things out. She kept leaving these voicemails about how we needed to heal together and how running away from problems doesn't solve them. Rich coming from a woman who'd been running from reality for years, pretending her precious golden child could do no wrong. The day I left, December 13th, was cold as fuck. There was frost on the windows and my breath was freezing in the air. It felt appropriate somehow, like the weather was matching my emotional state. I got up at 4 a.m., loaded the last few boxes into my truck, and hitched the U-Haul to the back. I was on the road before the sun was even up, driving away from the only home I'd ever known. I didn't leave a note. I didn't tell anyone goodbye. I just got in my truck with the U-Haul hitched to the back and started driving south. My mom must have noticed something was up pretty quickly, because by the time I hit Utah, my phone was blowing up with messages from random relatives. Apparently, she'd gone to my apartment, found it empty, and started calling everyone she could think of, crying about how I'd abandoned the family and how she was worried sick. I just kept driving, focusing on the road ahead rather than the chaos I was leaving behind. Somewhere in Utah, I got a friend request on Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. It was my mom trying to be sneaky, thinking I wouldn't realize it was her. Her message was a piece of work. "Why would you move without telling us? We're your family. We miss you and need you home for the holidays. We can work through this together." I replied with what might be the most satisfying message I've ever written. "You only have one son left. I'm not part of that family anymore." Then I blocked her new account and kept driving, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders with each mile I put between us. I hit Nevada that night, checked into a hotel because I was too tired to deal with the apartment situation. I laid there in that generic hotel room, staring at the ceiling, mentally processing the massive life change I was in the middle of. You know what? For the first time in months, I actually slept through the night. No stress dreams, no waking up angry at 3 a.m. Just peaceful, uninterrupted sleep. I found out later that my mom had a complete meltdown when she read my message. She started calling everyone in the family, crying about how her baby boy was making rash decisions and how she'd failed as a mother. Yeah, no shit you failed, Mom, just not in the way you think. So there I was in Nevada, actually starting to build a decent life for myself. I got promoted to project manager within 3 months. Turns out when you're not dealing with constant family drama, you can actually focus on work and excel at your job. I bought myself a new Ford F-250, the kind Lucas always wanted but couldn't afford because, as he liked to say, artists don't care about material things. Conveniently forgetting to mention they also don't earn material money. I started training BJJ at a local gym, figuring I needed a healthy way to deal with all the anger I was still carrying. I was finally sleeping through the night without waking up, wanting to punch walls. Things were looking up. Then it happened. It was a Wednesday in January when I got the call. I was on site reviewing plans with my foreman when my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but it had an Oregon area code. I almost didn't answer it, and part of me wishes I hadn't. It was my Aunt Patricia, my mom's sister, and probably the only reasonable one in the family. She was crying, which immediately set off alarm bells because Aunt Patricia never cries. She told me my mom had been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. Terminal. 3 months to live, maybe less. She said mom was asking for me, wanted to make peace before, you know. I sat there in my truck for an hour after that call, just staring at nothing. Then I called my boss, told him I needed a few days, and booked a flight back to Oregon for the next morning. I even packed a suit because I thought, well, you know what I thought. I was preparing to say goodbye to my mother, despite everything that had happened. The whole flight back to Oregon, I was thinking about my mom. Yeah, she'd fucked up royally with the Lucas and Lily situation, enabling and even encouraging their betrayal. But she was still my mother. I found myself remembering all the good times. Her coming to my lacrosse games and cheering louder than any other parent, making my favorite meals when I was sick, teaching me how to drive in that old Toyota when I was 16. By the time the plane landed, I'd convinced myself that maybe this was a sign. Maybe we could fix things before it was too late. Aunt Patricia picked me up at the airport. I should have noticed something was off when she wouldn't look me in the eye during the drive. She said mom was at home and wanted to see me right away. I steeled myself for seeing my mom frail and sick, possibly in a hospital bed set up in the living room. I wasn't prepared for what actually awaited me. I walked into that house, the house I grew up in, the house I hadn't set foot in since that disastrous Thanksgiving. And there they all were. Mom, Dad, Lucas, Lily, Kate, even Lily's parents. There was no hospital bed, no medical equipment. My mom was looking as healthy as ever in her favorite gardening sweater. The silence was deafening as I stood there, processing what was happening. My mom started crying. Her fake crying. The kind where she makes sure everyone can see her tears. Saying how she had to do something to get me home. How she couldn't bear to have her family torn apart. Lucas and Lily were holding hands, looking guilty but also satisfied. Like they thought this somehow was going to fix everything. You know that moment in movies where the hero just snaps and experiences this perfectly calm fury where everything becomes crystal clear? Yeah, that happened to me. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw her for what she was. This manipulative, toxic woman who'd spent my entire life enabling one son while destroying the other. You faked having cancer, I said it so quietly they had to lean in to hear me. You faked having terminal cancer to manipulate me into coming back. My mom tried to justify it. She started talking about how desperate times call for desperate measures, and how a mother will do anything to keep her family together. Lily actually nodded along, like this was somehow reasonable behavior. Lucas just stared at the floor, probably thinking about how he could turn this into material for his shitty poetry. My dad finally spoke up, trying to play peacemaker like always. "Son, your mother just wants to fix things," he said in that placating tone I'd heard all my life. "We all miss you. Lucas and Lily are engaged now, and we need to find a way to be a family again." That's when I lost it. Not violently, I was past that. I just started laughing. I couldn't stop. Here was my family who'd betrayed me in every way possible, who'd lied about having cancer, sitting there expecting me to just fall in line with their collective delusion. I looked at each of them in turn, taking in their expectant faces. You know what the funny thing is? I actually felt guilty on the plane. I was thinking about all the good memories, wondering if I'd been too harsh. But this, I gestured around the room, this is actually a gift, because now I know with absolute certainty that I made the right choice cutting you all out of my life. My mom started wailing, her real crying this time, the ugly kind she usually keeps private because it ruins her makeup. Lucas stood up, probably to try some brotherly bullshit reconciliation speech, but I just held up my hand to stop him. "The only reason I came back was because I thought my mother was dying," I said, my voice steady and cold. "Congratulations, Mom. You just killed any chance of ever having a relationship with me again." I turned around and walked out of that house, possibly for the last time in my life. I could hear them calling after me, my mom's cries getting more hysterical by the second. Lily actually tried to follow me out the door, saying something about understanding my pain and wanting to help. I just kept walking. I was done with all of them. Aunt Patricia was waiting in her car, crying for real this time. Turns out my mom had manipulated her too, told her I was suicidal and needed an intervention. She said the cancer story was the only way to get me home. Classic mom, using everyone's emotions against them, even her own sisters. I got an Uber to the airport, caught the next flight back to Las Vegas, and blocked every Oregon number in my phone, except Aunt Patricia's. She'd earned the right to stay connected after unwittingly being used in my mom's manipulation, and then exposing the truth. After the fake cancer stunt, I threw myself into work and building my new life in Nevada. I started dating Olivia, this awesome girl I met at my BJJ gym. She was different from Lily in every way. Independent, straightforward, with zero interest in playing family politics. She'd heard bits and pieces of my story through mutual friends at the gym, but never pushed me to talk about it. She just accepted me as I was, baggage and all. Things with Olivia were going great. She was a trauma surgeon who worked crazy hours like me and understood the value of hard work in a way Lily never did. We'd been together almost a year when Christmas rolled around. Her family invited me to spend the holidays with them in Reno. They were normal people, good people. Her dad was a retired police officer who actually wanted to hear about my construction projects and asked intelligent questions. Her mom kept trying to feed me more prime rib and wouldn't take no for an answer. It felt healthy, real, nothing like the toxic environment I'd grown up in. Christmas Eve was perfect. Olivia's mom made this incredible beef Wellington, their family tradition. We exchanged gifts, watched old Christmas movies, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I could have this kind of normal family life again. I should have known better. Christmas morning started out great too. More food, more presents, more of that warm family feeling I'd been missing. Then Olivia's mom mentioned they were expecting some family friends for dinner. I didn't think much of it at first, even helped set up extra chairs in the dining room to accommodate the additional guests. The doorbell rang around 4 p.m. Olivia's mom went to answer it, and I heard them before I saw them. My mother's voice trying to sound sweet and concerned, like she always did when she had an audience. My whole body went cold. I turned around, and there they were. Mom, Dad, Kate, Lucas, and Lily, standing in the doorway like some fucked up Christmas card. That's when I saw Olivia's face. She wasn't surprised to see them. She looked guilty. She'd known. She'd helped plan this whole thing because she thought she was helping. It turns out she'd been talking to my mother for months, coordinating this intervention. My mother had fed her some story about how worried they all were about me, how I was running from my problems, how I needed family support to heal properly. My mom started her usual routine right away. What they did was wrong, but your actions are unacceptable too, she said, somehow equating me leaving town after being betrayed with my brother fucking my fiancé for 2 years. My dad chimed in about how enough was enough and how Lucas had suffered enough for his mistakes. Suffered? He got the girl, kept the family support system, and I'm the one who needed to get over it? Lily was there holding Lucas's hand, wearing this fancy new engagement ring. I was pretty sure it was bought with money from selling my old house, the one my mom had convinced them to invest in as a couple after I left. She tried to speak, probably to share some profound insight about how love works in mysterious ways, or whatever they'd rehearsed in the car on the way over. I cut her off before she could start. I looked right at Olivia and said, "Find your own way home. I'll pick up my things later." Simple, quiet, final. Everyone started talking at once. Olivia crying, my mom doing her theatrical gasping thing, Lucas trying to play peacemaker like he had any right. As I was leaving, my mom grabbed my arm and started going on about how their family name was so important, how she'd raised me better than this. That's when I told her I'd already changed my last name months ago. You'd think I'd told her I'd committed murder. She actually collapsed into a chair, wailing about family legacy and tradition. The drive back to Las Vegas was long and quiet. I had plenty of time to think about how stupid I'd been, trusting someone again. Olivia called about 50 times that night, left voicemails about how she was just trying to help, how she thought bringing everyone together would fix things. She was a classic manipulation victim. My mom had played her just like she played everyone else. I got back to my apartment around 3 a.m., looked at the Christmas tree Olivia and I had decorated together, all the presents still wrapped underneath. I took every gift she'd given me over the past year, put them in a box, added her spare key and the toothbrush she kept in my bathroom. Everything. I dropped it all off at her place the next morning before she got back from Reno. The worst part was finding out later that this whole Christmas intervention had been in the works for months. Olivia had been reporting back to my mother about everything. Where I was working, who I was hanging out with, if I was dating anyone else. She'd even helped them find my new address, which I'd kept private specifically to avoid this kind of shit. My mom had played Olivia perfectly, shown her old family photos, told stories about how close we all used to be, painted this picture of a concerned mother just trying to help her troubled son. And Olivia, wanting to be the one who fixed everything, fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Then about a year later, my company won this huge contract to demolish and rebuild a bunch of foreclosed properties in Oregon, Guess whose house was on that list? Yep, my parents' place. The one my mom had remortgaged to pay for Lucas and Lily's dream wedding. The same house where she'd hosted all those family dinners, where she'd orchestrated her little manipulations, where she'd welcomed my brother and ex into my old room. I personally volunteered to oversee that demolition. I drove up there on a Tuesday morning and watched them tear down every last brick. My mom showed up halfway through, probably tipped off by a neighbor. She looked old. Not just older, but worn down. I found out later she's working as a dollar store cashier now, her first real job in 30 years. Karma's got a sense of humor, I guess. But the demolition of my parents' house was just the beginning of the spectacular downfall I witnessed from a safe distance. Through Kate, who finally grew a spine and reached out to apologize for her role in everything, I got the full update on everyone's karma-filled journey. Lucas and Lily's perfect marriage crashed and burned just 6 months after they said, "I do." Turns out Lily's got a type. She likes to cheat. Kate told me she was caught with Lucas's best friend, the same guy who was his best man at their wedding. But here's the real kicker. She's pregnant with his kid. The same Lily who told me she couldn't have children, which was apparently a lie, is now carrying his ex-best friend's baby. The irony is almost poetic. Lucas didn't handle this betrayal well. According to Kate, he started drinking heavily, showing up to places completely wasted, and lost his job at the vinyl record store after coming in drunk one too many times. He's living in my mom's basement now, in their crappy rental apartment, writing angsty songs about betrayal. The irony is completely lost on him, that he's experiencing exactly what he put me through, except I didn't knock up his fiancée. Mom and Dad finally separated too. Turns out Mom had been lying about their finances for years, taking out credit cards in Dad's name to fund Lucas's various projects and their wedding. Dad found out when they tried to refinance the house, and the bank laughed them out of the office. He's living with my aunt now, finally started going to therapy, and actually called me to apologize. He said he should have stood up to Mom years ago, that he was a coward for letting her manipulate everyone. I haven't decided yet if I'm ready to forgive him, but at least he's showing genuine remorse. Lily's teaching career is over too. Word got around about her history of sleeping with her students' relatives. Yeah, turns out Lucas wasn't the first time she'd done this kind of thing. No school district will touch her now. She's working at a call center, living with her new baby daddy in some rundown apartment complex. Her parents, who were so understanding about her following her heart with Lucas, won't even speak to her now that she's done the same thing to him. As for me, life's actually pretty good these days. I met this amazing woman named Hannah at a farmer's market about a year ago. She's nothing like Lily or Olivia. She's direct, honest, and actually has a moral compass. We moved in together 6 months ago, and she's now pregnant with our first kid. When she found out about the pregnancy, she made it clear she didn't want any contact with my family. She even blocked them all on social media before I could ask her to, which showed me she truly understood the situation and had my back. My mom somehow found out about the baby. Small town gossip never dies, I guess. She sent me a box of my old baby things with this long letter about family legacy and second chances. I kept the baby stuff since it was technically mine to begin with, but the letter went straight in the trash. She even tried creating new social media accounts to reach me, posting about how much she misses her firstborn and how a child needs their grandmother. I blocked every single account as soon as they appeared. Kate's getting married next month. She and Dad want to reconcile. No Mom or Lucas involved. Kate told me they've both been in therapy, working through their roles in everything that happened. She admitted she was too weak to stand up to Mom back then, and Dad acknowledged how his passivity enabled everything that happened. Hannah says maybe it's time to consider letting them back in, but she's not pushing it. She's seen all the screenshots, read all the manipulative messages, and knows the whole story. She says she'll support whatever I decide, but also reminds me that people can change if they do the work. Keyword being if. Here's the thing though. Watching karma finally catch up with everyone has been surprisingly empty. I thought I'd feel satisfied seeing them all suffer, seeing the consequences of their actions finally come home to roost. But mostly I just feel relieved. Relieved that I got out when I did. Relieved that I built my own life separate from their toxicity. Relieved that I broke the cycle of manipulation and betrayal that defined my family for so long. For those asking about Dad and Kate, I still haven't decided if I'll go to the wedding. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. And while I appreciate their efforts to make amends, I'm not sure I'm ready to let them back into my life just yet. The thought of seeing them brings up so many complicated emotions. There's still anger there, still hurt, but also this strange sense of pity for how much time we all lost to my mother's manipulations. Hannah says I don't have to decide everything right now. That becoming a father myself might change how I feel about family, or it might reinforce my decision to keep my distance. She reminds me that forgiveness doesn't mean I have to welcome them back with open arms. It can simply mean letting go of the anger that's been weighing me down. Sometimes I think about the parallel lives unfolding. My mom struggling to make ends meet at her dollar store job. Lucas writing sad songs in her basement about the woman who betrayed him. Lily raising a child with yet another man she'll probably cheat on eventually. Then I look at my life with Hannah, our future child, the career I've built, and I know I made the right choice. The hardest lesson I've learned through all of this is that family isn't just about blood. It's about people who respect you, who stand by you when things get tough, who don't manipulate you for their own purposes. By that definition, Hannah is more family to me than my biological relatives ever were. She and our child will be the family I choose, the family I build with love and honesty as the foundation. Maybe someday I'll be ready to let Kate and my dad back in, on my terms. Maybe I'll even want my child to know their aunt and grandfather. But my mother and Lucas? Some betrayals cut too deep, leave scars that never fully heal. They made their choices, and now they're living with the consequences, just as I'm living with mine. The difference is, my consequences include peace, stability, and authentic relationships, while theirs include lost homes, broken marriages, and the bitter knowledge that they destroyed the family they claim to value so much. In the end, that's punishment enough. I don't need to watch them suffer to know that I won. I won by walking away. I won by building something better. I won by breaking free from the toxic patterns that defined my childhood. And that victory is sweeter than any revenge could ever be.